Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you all today. My name is Andre. I'm from Canada, and I'm really, really pleased to be with you today and talk about coaching girls and women in baseball. For some of you who don't know much about me, so I've been with Team Canada. I've been working with Baseball Canada for about 20 years. And going back in time, in 2003, I became the head coach of our first ever national team, Canadian national team. And over the years, I've had the privilege of coaching these wonderful athletes throughout the course of 8 World Championship and also Pan Am Games back in 2015. So that being said, as a person, as a human being, as a coach, I have to admit that those athletes have made me a better person along the way, and they've made me also a better coach. Also, in all those years that I've spent with those fantastic athletes. So today, what I want to be talking to you is the differences that I've found over time between coaching boys or men versus girls and women. I've had the privilege also to teach and coach boys earlier in my career, so I think I'm in a position to make those differences. And maybe one last thing I'd like to mention also is that when I decided to leave my position as the head coach of the Canadian national team after the 2018 World Cup, I became right away the head coach of the France national team. And we had the first ever European championship in 2019 that we were able to win the gold medal against the Netherlands. So that was another great experience for me, going back and teach again fantastic athletes back to a great country also that helped me a lot along the way as well. So as we move towards this presentation here, I want to discuss different things with you, but I want to start with a video, and this video will make you smile. Probably will bring you back in time with an extract from a great movie that we've all seen before.
Hey, Evelyn, can I ask you a question? You got a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Which team do you play for?
Well, I'm a peach.
Well, I was just wondering, because I couldn't figure out why you would throw home when we've got a 2-run lead. You let the tying run get on second, and we lost the lead because of you. Now you start using your head. That's that lump that's 3 feet above your ass. Are you crying?
No.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Why don't you leave her alone, Jimmy?
Oh, you zip it, Doris. Rogers Hornsby was my manager, and he called me a talking pile of pig shit. And that was when my parents drove all the way down from Michigan to see me play the game. And did I cry? No. And you know why?
No.
Because there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball. No crying.
What's the matter, Jimmy?
All right, so you probably smile a little bit. You saw the great performance again from great actors in this movie. Tom Hanks leading the way as a male coach, coaching women's in that professional league that was in fact a reality in the previous century. But when we go back in time, also like those stereotypes that you have noticed while watching those videos. Are still present today. And if you allow me to go back in time and talk about this gentleman here who've done a lot for the Olympic movement, this is Pierre de Coubertin, and he's a gentleman at the origin of the Olympic Games, who basically, like if you Google his name, some people will claim that he's the inventor of the Olympic Games. And I'll let you read what he said back then, which is not really positive for him, but that set the stage a little bit for the situation we're in right now and how we can all work together to give more opportunities for girls and women in sports. So Pierre de Coubertin back in 1912 said, "We feel that the Olympic Games must be reserved for men. We must continue to try to achieve the following definition, that the solemn and periodic exaltation of male athleticism with internationalism at its base, loyalty as a mean art for its setting, and male applause as reward." So the sole role of women at that time, based on his comment, was for women and girls to only be there to reward the winner. So that was his view at that time of the Olympic movement. And if we look now at stereotypes that are still present in our society today, and still present in the mind of some of our coaches in baseball and in other sports as well. So when you look at some of the adjectives that define a man or define a woman, you're going to find those words. And when you look at the left side of your screen right now, you look at the masculinity. Most people will still today in 2021 identify male as being more confident, as being more sportive, like being in sports, independent, leader, aggressive, dominator, and ambitious. And many people still today associate being shy, affectionate, compliant, kind, loving, naive, and sensitive for girls and women. Although in this, what I learned along the way is that for me as a male coach dealing with female athletes, if I do have an athlete that shows any of those stereotypes associated with men, I'm interested in having them. So if you're a great leader, if you're more confident, or if you're ambitious, I don't see those words as being identified solely for male, or could be for women also for the other words. I see them associated with human beings. Therefore, one of my first tip to you today is to not see those words as being associated with men or women, but being associated with a human being, an athlete in our case. Therefore, don't put yourself any barriers in order to select your athletes for your teams. So like I like to say also, if you look at this diagram in front of you here, it's an ice rink, it's a hockey rink, but no coach would want to play on only one side of the ice, or would only like to play on defense or offense in baseball. You'd like to play on both sides. Therefore, you need to expand how you perceive human beings based on stereotypes that have been there for quite some time in our society. So back to the traditional stereotypes. Female athletes often still today perceived by some coaches as being non-aggressive, gentle, dependent, cries a lot. You know, you've seen it in the video, emotional, submissive, and sensitive. While on the men's side, they're more being seen as being dominant, active, logical, tough, decisive, where they don't cry, and a bit more aggressive. So for me, I don't see, as a coach, I don't see the difference between the two. Again, they're being seen by myself and our assistant coaches as being human beings. So that's one of the main things that I want to come across here. And same with all kinds of other things that we see in life in general. And this one will make you laugh also. Most people, when they see this, they'll associate the big truck with the men, with boys. Where are they going to see this vehicle as being associated more with female person or women and girls? So I'd like you to think differently moving forward about those stereotypes and how we can destruct a little bit our thinking about how we see the female athlete, especially in our sport. We recently have the International Women's Day. Here's another good video that I want to show because I want to talk about confidence after in talking with the differences between women's girls versus men and boys.
Jeg heter Selma. Og jeg heter Martin.
Jeg heter Ask. Jeg heter Victoria.
Jeg heter Lars.
Og jeg heter Felicia.
Nå har jeg en liten jobb til dere. Jeg tenkte at dere skulle putte de blå ballene i den ene vasen og de rosa i den andre.
Okay. Skal vi ta rosa i den og blå i den da?
Nei.
Omvendt.
Blå i denne.
Men nå skal dere få belønningen deres.
Oi.
Hva er dette for noe? Hva er dette for noe?
Ok, og nå kan dere åpne øynene.
Hva? Jeg fikk litt mer.
Molly, grunnen til at du har fått mindre enn Thomas, det er faktisk fordi du er jente.
Det er kjemperart.
Det er ikke bra.
Det er skikkelig urettferdig.
Hva tenker du, Felicia?
Vi har jobbet helt likt, og så får vi ikke det samme. Vi var like flinke, og vi burde få like mye.
Hvorfor det?
Fordi ellers så blir det urettferdig.
Det er liksom ikke forskjell på jente og gutt, da.
Jeg tenker at det er feil.
Hvorfor er det feil?
Jenter er ikke mindre verdt enn gutter.
Det har ikke noe å si hvis man er gutt eller jente.
Sånn, jeg tror det er like fint da. Nei.
Nå har vi like mye. Nå har vi like mye.
So this video has been produced by Norway, so that's why we had the subtitles there. But you probably see something interesting in the sense that when we start rewarding girls and women differently than boys and men, it has a clear impact on their confidence. And confidence is something that is so important, not only in life, but also in sport in general, that we need to address this problem. And let me show you some data about the differences between men and women with regards to confidence. So some recent research is showing that between the age of 8 and 14 years old, girls' self-confidence decrease significantly and by 30%. So that tells you a lot about the fact that when we're dealing with girls in sport, their confidence is also lower in general than male athletes. Therefore, as coaches, we need to play a significant role in trying to increase that self-confidence in the athletes. So one, they can perform better. And another thing also is that they can be even more self-confident in life in general also. So when we define confidence for both girls and boys, here's what the research is showing also. So for the girl, confidence is proud of who you are as a person. And for a boy is believing that you can accomplish anything you want. So we want basically to reverse this. And for coaches, whether you're male coaches or female coaches, dealing with female athletes, we need to help those athletes to understand and believe that they can also accomplish anything they want. And especially through in our sport, where more and more women are occupying leadership position in sports, whether it's coaching, whether it's umpiring, whether it's front office with Major League Baseball or other organization, IOC, and so on and so forth. So we need to help them understand their potential, so therefore they can achieve their goals and their dreams. And lastly, on confidence, before we get to the details of what I want to present to you today. So research showing that men overestimate their abilities and performance, while women underestimate both. So results are showing that performance does not differ in quality. So their perception of their abilities and performance is different, but the actual performance is not is about the same. So women will apply for promotion only if they meet 100% of the qualification, while men will go for it if they only meet 50% of them. So that tells you a lot about the self-confidence difference between the two, and also the role we have to play as coaches also in order to change that. So what is stopping women is not their abilities to succeed, because they can do as well as men, but what is stopping them is the choice not to do it, not to apply, not to play baseball, not to think that they can play on your national team, and they just don't do it. And it's backed again to the self-confidence. So going more to the technical side, the physical side of things, one thing for me that is really, really important as a coach is this. My goal is to bring those athletes to the top of the iceberg. And the top of the iceberg is fantastic, because this is where you have the nicest view. This is the pinnacle of everything that you want to accomplish as an individual, as an athlete. But if we want that iceberg to stay above the water, you need a good foundation. You need to invest in the physical and the technical and the tactical and the mental, in the life skills of your athletes, in the confidence I just talked about, in order for that iceberg to remain above the water. And all those things that I just mentioned is what you see underneath the water. It's the foundation. And if you forget to pay attention to your foundation, therefore, your iceberg will not survive for long. And then you're going to end up in that type of situation where, the athletes will be a little bit more fragile. And when you're more fragile, when you have a little setback, or you have an injury, or you have a little problem, whether it's personally or professionally, then everything will collapse. So our role as coaches is to build that foundation that is very, very important. And we need to think differently about it also. And Albert Einstein has mentioned something great years ago about his own definition of insanity. And insanity for him was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So this is a really, really powerful quote and slide that makes us think about how we approach the female athlete. And in some cases, while some countries or federation or coaches saying, I'm not seeing any results, but you've never changed the way you approach the athletes or the way you do programming for the female athletes. So let me explain to you a little bit more about those elements that are important. So when we talk about athlete development, so I'm getting to the really specific of this presentation here. So when you look at athlete development, you look at three important sectors that will make a difference. If you're looking at the bottom of your screen right now, we're talking about physical literacy. Physical literacy is the fundamental movement skills that you're going to be developing between the age of 5 to 11 or 12. That are going to be the foundation for anything that you want to do in life after. As we know, right now, tons of research are showing that there's a big dropout for women's and girls' participation in sport around the age of 13, 14. Most of the time is confidence, is motivation, is the lack of programming and other factors. But if we develop good physical literacy, so if an athlete is capable of moving properly with confidence and with motivation and with competencies, our chances of keeping them involved in our sports, and not only in baseball, but it's in sports in general, will increase. Therefore, they can move on to the top left of your screen It could be elite participation, excellence, like highest possible level, world championship, national teams, Olympic games, and so on and so forth. Or, which is also fantastic, is that they could be active for life. And maybe they can like give back to their sport by becoming an official, becoming an umpire, becoming a coach also moving forward. Or maybe they can just stay active and healthy for the rest of their lives. And if we accomplish that by putting good programming to our girls and women in our sport, we've accomplished something even bigger than our sport. And we are looking to do that through 10 key factors. And let me explain those key factors here. And the first one here is that kids are not adults in miniature. They have special needs. They have needs that needs to be specifically addressed by coaches at all ages. But for kids, sometimes what I see as a problem is that coaches will approach kids from a high level perspective, saying, okay, like I've been a high performance athlete in women's baseball or any other sport. I'm going to replicate this with kids that I'm training, young girls that are developing in the sport of baseball. This is wrong because those individuals, those young girls, do have special needs that needs to be addressed by the coaches. The second concept here is that girls are not boys. I think I've mentioned that earlier to you, but physically, girls have different needs than boys that have to be addressed also by the coaches. And let me explain a little bit more in details what I mean by this. And what I mean by this is that there are sensitive periods that needs to be understood by coaches in order to get the most out of your athlete development. And this is where I want to talk about here with this next slide that I'm going to spend a bit of time to explain. So those sensitive periods of trainability means that in life, in the chronological pathway of a person, there are moments in your development where you should put more emphasis on some athletic abilities. And let me explain that. So at the top of your screen right now, you're seeing the graphic for female athlete, and at the bottom, you're seeing the graphic for male athletes. So let me explain one quick example here on the differences between the two. In general, female athletes will mature earlier than male athletes. So young girls will mature earlier than young boys. So that's we've seen it for ages, and that's not going to change. So in the graphic you're seeing there, for an example, if you're looking at speed development, so you're seeing speed on the female side, that is happening between approximately the age of 6 and 8 years old, where you're seeing speed happening between about the age of 7 and 9 for boys. So that tells you something. Regardless of the sport, as coaches, we need to put an emphasis on speed when you're dealing with young girls between the age of 6 and 8. It's paramount. It's so important. And at the same time, knowing that speed is important for baseball, it's important for other sports also. It is our obligation to serve the needs of the athletes, regardless of the sport that they're going to be choosing later on in life. So that's really, really important. If you look at skills, there is a moment between the age of, I would say, 8-ish to about 11, 12, where this is the golden age to train skills in the sports-specific environment. So basic skills, I'm meaning here, not advanced skills, but basic skills. So for little girls playing baseball for the first time between the age of 8 and 11 or 12, we need to put emphasis towards our basic skills of our sport. So hitting, running, throwing, receiving, those are important skills. Then happens something really, really important in our lives, and nobody can't escape it. We're all going through this, and it's growth spurt. And at some point, And that can happen at any time between the age of 11, 12 to all the way to 15. That's the growth spurt. This is where your body will be transformed. And if you remember your high school years, you probably remember that some of your friends were taller than others, were smaller than others. It was all kinds of different differences between your friends at that age. So what you have to remember from this one here is when the growth spurt is starting, then it's a good opportunity for female athletes to develop speed again and stamina. Stamina is your endurance, your aerobic capacities that you should put time into development. So that's important. And when it's decelerating, there is a moment, an opportunity there to work on strength development. Strength development is to start lifting weights, and you're seeing that is happening only after the growth spurt. So the question you might be having here is, how do you measure that? And that would be a fantastic question. So the answer to this is pretty easy. So the first thing that grows in the human body is limbs, so arms and legs. So every 2 months, we should be measuring our athletes. Therefore, a simple test you can do is arm span. So you go against the wall, you extend your arms, and when you see those arm span growing, it means that the curve in your growth spurt is going up. You're starting your growth spurt because that's the first thing that is growing. And the indication that you're about to decelerate your growth spurt is the fact that your trunk will be the last thing that grows, meaning that you can be measuring sitting height. So you sit on the floor against the wall again, and you measure from the ground all the way to the top of your head. When you see that it starts to grow, it means that it's decelerating, meaning at the same time that strength training could start. That doesn't mean that you can never work on strength earlier, but the conditions will be different, and we will emphasize body weight work during growth spurt. So those moments are important because some of you coaches might have a great athlete, a great female athlete that has started to grow really, really early. Tall athlete, throws the ball hard, really, really dominating during the age of 13, 14, 15. But because you want to win so much, because your perspective is on short term and not long term, it means that later on in their career, injuries will start to happen. So this is why it's so important to consider, because you can make an athlete in that particular stage of development, or you can break an athlete. And I've seen so many examples of athletes that have been broken because of bad management of this situation here. So let me go a little bit more in details here about those trainability. So I mentioned here that speed development is something that you can train. You can always train it. Declines significantly with age. I'm sure some of you listening would agree that trying to be faster at the age of 40, 50, it's a bit more challenging. But the critical window of opportunity for females, 6 to 8 years old, and then after 11 to 13. The key thing here, if you want to have access to that second one, okay, you need to put the emphasis on it in the first one. If not, you won't be able to have it. So the first window could be different as far as what you're going to train versus what you're going to train in the second window. But again, the key thing here is you need to be able to tackle that first one before you think about the second one. So that's a big takeaway of this one here. The second one I mentioned also earlier, skill development. Again, if you've tried to ski for the first time when you're 40 or 50, or skate for the first time, or hit a baseball for the first time, it's way more difficult when you're older. So it declines with age. So again, there is a window of opportunity for female athlete between the age of 8 and 11. And you need to take into consideration early and late specialization sports. In our case, we're talking baseball here. Our best athletes are not 14 and 15. So peak of performance is later in life. Therefore, you have the time to develop skills. So it's not something you should be rushing. It's important. Quality is more important here than quantity. So when we say here importance of transitional skills, it means that if you've learned something in another sport prior to coming to baseball, that can help you achieve what you want to achieve in the sport of baseball. I didn't talk about it, but there's some research also on flexibility that shows that there's kind of a window of opportunity between the age of 8 and 10 as well to develop flexibility for males and females. So that's something I wanted to mention also. So back to what I just mentioned here, because we're a late specialization sport, there is something I like to say that's that excellence takes time, and there is no shortcuts to become the best you can be in your sport. So you need to see the journey of the female athlete as being long-term versus short-term, and winning a game on Friday night or winning a game next week at the regional, provincial, national, or international level. So it takes a little bit more of a vision in order to develop an athlete long-term versus short-term. So that's an important takeaway also. So the 10 key factors, I've been through some of them quickly, but the 10 key factors are physical literacy. I've talked about it earlier. So the fundamental movements that you need to develop for athletes. Specialization. One thing to consider also, and I'm giving you a little secret here from Canada, but for us in Canada, for the national team, having players with the ability to play multiple positions, I believe has been a key success factors over the years. So not having athletes specialize at a position too early will probably get you as a team to another level, but will get the athletes to another level as well, because they do have appreciation of what the other position are all about, better understanding as well. Developmental age also, where you are in your progression, will be important. We talk about trainability. Obviously, there are some moments in your progression, in your athlete development journey, that you should be focusing more on some aspects. There's the intellectual, emotional, and moral development that needs to be taken into consideration as well. I've mentioned excellence takes time. Periodization is how you're going to build your year, how you're going to build your season, how you're going to build those pieces and putting them down all together in order to achieve a peak of performance at the right time. We need to be able to periodize and pick proper competition and to enter them also into the planning of the athletes. We need to align the system. Sometimes in some countries, the system are so complicated that you can get lost easily. So that's another key factor. And the last one is Kaizen, from my friends Japanese, what it means in English, continuous improvement. So always looking for a better way of doing things. So couple more information to share with you. So try to see the athlete. I like this image because it says a lot about the athlete. So the athlete is like the top of a table with 4 strong legs. And dealing with female athletes, you understand that the technical, the tactical, the physical, and the mental part are so important. And regardless if you're dealing with female or male athletes, you can apply this image to any athletes. So if you remove one leg from this table, let's say we remove the mental leg. We don't talk mental. We don't develop the mental side. The table will remain up. It will not collapse. Like, you can try it at home if you want, if you have the time. If you want to remove one leg from a table, the table will not collapse. It will be shaky, but it will not collapse. But the problem is that if you decide to sit on the corner of which you remove the leg from the table, now it's going to collapse. So my point here is that if you never work on one of those elements, and if the game is requiring you or requiring the athlete to be stronger mentally, tactically, physically, and technically, the athlete will not be able to perform, and therefore will have an impact on their confidence, and therefore will not have any good performance. So as a coach, you need to be able to understand that importance. And I want to leave you with two or three more slides for you to understand what kids are saying about what they want from their coach. And again, this is not a difference between female or male here. This is across the board. Respect and encouragement, being a positive model, clear and concise communication, have a good knowledge of the sport, and being a good listener. What I've noticed over my 15 years as a coach of female athletes, being respectful, encouraging them, offering them positive praises, catching them being good. So when I see them doing good things, to tell them, or to have a system where the other athletes will share those encouragement between them, or have assistant coach that will provide those positive feedback, will go a long way. And when I talk also about being a positive model, how you behave, how you intervene with the female athletes will have a great impact also on their performance. Okay, and let me explain that a little bit more in detail here. So there's three sections to this: is identity, action, and emotion. And in this particular order, it's really, really important. Let's say that you're not happy during the course of a game, bad decision from an umpire maybe, or mistake from one of your female athletes on your team. Some coaches will react with an emotion, right? They'll be not happy and their body language will not be positive. Therefore, they'll make an action. Maybe they argue with the umpire. Maybe they will break a bat or whatever it is. So you make an action, and that chain will define you as an individual. So every time you're not happy with something, you make a bad behavior. Therefore, it defines you as a coach, as an individual. And when we talk about being a role model, this is not the message we want to send to our female athletes or athletes in general. So we want to reverse this, and using the same flow as you see on your screen right now is, when you're not happy about something, you're going back to what's important for you. So you're going back to your own identity. You're making an action, and then that action will have an impact on other people's emotion. So it's the totally reverse paradigm that we have here in order to create a better learning experience and better sports experience for a women's athlete at the same time. So I've given you lots of information, and this equation I like because it says a lot about what we talked about. Is knowledge without action is nothing. So K minus A equals 0. Knowledge without action is nothing. So the question I have for you is, what are you going to do right now in order to implement some of those elements, knowledge that I shared with you today? Because we have our friend Yoda in Star Wars that said at some point, you do or do not, there is no try. And keep that in mind. Every time you answer a question by, I will try to do something, I will try to implement something, you never do it. So you either do or do not, there is no try. I encourage you to try those strategies, to pay attention to those different moments in the career of your athletes, in their pathway, and then long-term pathway, so you can have a better impact. And at the same time, making sure that those athletes are actually reaching their own potential. And finally, let's make sure that we all work together in order to provide as much experience, opportunities as possible for girls and women in our beautiful sport of baseball. So I thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions. And I'm also looking forward to meet some of you at some point during international competition or during seminars or any other events that are going to be organized soon by the WBSC. So thanks again for having me, and I remain available for questions. Thank you, everybody.